Survival horror happens to be one of my favorite game genres, and Resident Evil happens to be one of my favorite game franchises. And since Resident Evil 7 has recently come out, I figured we'd take a look at Countdown Vampires, which is considered to be a clone of the classic Resident Evil games. For me, it's important for a survival horror game to draw you in with a sense of intrigue and mystery, but don't mistake confusion for intrigue, as the beginning of this game is confusing. The opening cinematic introduces the protagonist, Keith, who tells you that he is a police officer from a neighboring state working as a bodyguard for VIPs, because that makes sense. Suddenly a fire breaks out, tons of people turn into monsters because... sprinkler? Guy with gun saves you, tells you to use white water, guy runs off, and game starts. Few problems with this. Why the fire? What's happening to the people? Why is it happening to the people? Who is this dude? Why does he know how to turn them back to normal? What's going on? When this many questions are posed so quickly, it's easy to see why many people would shy away from the game. Resident Evil's intro explains the situation and why the STARS members are in the forest, which all makes sense, and why they're in the mansion. It also introduces you to some of the enemies, and your goals in a way that feels relatively natural. It gives you direction. What is your direction after Countdown Vampires intro? I couldn't find one. It throws so much at you it's difficult to ascertain your goal. It's okay to pose questions to the player, but don't smother the player with them. Good pacing builds intrigue. Poor pacing creates confusion. After the opening, the casino enters lockdown, and you have just a few minutes to get to a section called Screaming Moon, before the shutters close and trap you. As you travel through the casino, you'll meet Misato, a fellow survivor who has a strange moonlight disease, and Vampire Hunter D. Turns out Gels, the Emperor of Darkness, is going to be resurrected, and Misato happens to be the key to a vampiric prophecy that is coming to fruition. There is potential with this plot, but the cutscenes are short, few and far between, very few of them carry any plot relevance, and ultimately relies too heavily on coincidences for the story to feel cohesive to me. Since this is a casino, you could probably guess money will play some kind of role, and it does. As you progress through the game, you will slowly gain cash. No particular reason or explanation. Your cash just starts reproducing. Money is used to purchase healing items from vending machines. You can also gamble in the hopes of getting a bit more of a monetary boost. I do not recommend gambling in this game. The odds, much like real life, are terrible, and money is a resource, and like all resources in survival horror games, it is limited, and would be much better used on healing items. Countdown Vampires totes the trusty, tried and true tank control scheme. Unlike the Capcom Classic series, however, this game gives you a lot of ammo, and with this ridiculous amount of ammo comes a larger number of enemies. This builds tension in a different way, overwhelming the player with the enemy numbers, but giving you the means to handle it. Luckily, your rate of fire for the tranquilizer is really high. Simply holding both the aim and the fire buttons will have you continuously shoot. You'll go through your darts fairly quickly, but you'll be able to down the ghouls with relative ease. This leads to another of the notable differences, and that is the white water system. After you've tranquilized the enemies, they will be twitching on the floor. Stand over them and press the X button to use the white water. A similar system would be used in the Resident Evil remake in the form of kerosene. This is an interesting system that would have been really cool except for one thing, the white water itself. It's not explained, but one can assume it's holy water. If that's the case, why do you have a limitless supply of it? You're not a bishop or a priest. I understand that you are in a vampire-ran casino, so having holy water fountains here and there wouldn't really make much sense. But being a cop that can bless his water bottle doesn't make any sense either. Because white water is a resource that has no end, in a game of which its genre's defining staple is resource management, it ends up being an unnecessary mechanic that adds an extra step to defeating some enemies, and ultimately serves little purpose other than to slow your progression. Luckily, the tranquilizer is not your only means of dispatching foes. As you progress through the game, you will come across various firearms, such as pistols and shotguns. The ammo for these is a bit less common, but the ghouls don't require nearly as many shots to take down. When using guns to kill ghouls, you don't need to worry about white water, as you just plain murdered them. That being said, there are definitely some enemies I would recommend saving your bullets for, so make sure you know which guns you have equipped. I say guns because you have 2 weapon slots that you switch between just by aiming and pressing the circle button. This is a rather nice feature, as it reduces the number of times you have to open the menu. That being said, both the aiming and swapping animation is a bit slow, so if the monsters are basically on top of you, it is slightly faster to switch in the menu, and every frame counts. Having both tranquilizers and standard firearms in a game like this is a pretty good idea. Do I mow down the enemies in this room with my shotgun, or do I take a little extra time to trank them all so I can have more ammunition for a possible boss fight or larger, heavier hitting enemies? And this isn't always an easy decision to make. Ghouls are generally faster and come in greater numbers than the zombies we're used to from Resident Evil, and it can be easy to get overwhelmed in some rooms. As a whole though, the enemies are a mixed bag. You have your common cannon fodder enemies in the form of vampiric ghouls that are faster and traditionally more intelligent than zombies, though they can't figure out how stairs work. Then you have your special enemy types, some of which make perfect sense, others make no sense at all. You have some strange and seemingly unrelated creatures, such as this strange mosquito man thing, and whatever these things are. Then you have werewolves and giant bats, both of which are classic horror creatures that go hand in hand with vampires. By the way, f*** the bats. When there are two in a room, it is insanely easy to get stun locked. They have a grapple attack which requires you to button mash to get your way out. However, once you break free, you are knocked down, and thanks in part to the greatly slow aiming speed, by the time you get up, you are grabbed by the other one before you can have a chance to ready your gun. Rinse and repeat. Instances like this led to a nice handful of deaths for me, and was a bit demoralizing. As you may have guessed, combat isn't all the game's about. Like most other entries in the survival horror genre, there are environmental puzzles that impede your path. You'll need to reroute power to unlock certain doors with special digital keys, or retrieve clock hands from one side of the casino to open special locks on the other. There are also a small number of block puzzles on the item boxes. These smaller puzzles work, but I had trouble with some of the larger ones, such as this tombstone-esque puzzle. It requires a ton of inventory space, and is hard to determine the proper order to place them in. After making your way through the casino and down to the secret lab, you'll escape in a van. That breaks down near a dam, which also has a secret lab, because of course it does. Apparently some humans believe that Gels' DNA is the key to genetic perfection or something. Deeper in the lab, you find the Crypt of Gels, because of course you do, where you will be met by 3 vampiric witches. They hoist you up in the air, and just as they're about to kill you, bang! Aw yeah! The vampire hunter is gonna team up with you, and together you'll... Huh. Okay. So that just happened. Honestly, the witch fight is actually pretty cool. You can't just brute force this fight. You have to actively dodge a variety of attacks while fighting, and each kill is a satisfying relief, gradually lessening the intensity of the battle. More bosses like this could have really helped elevate this game above its competition. After defeating the witches and more exploring, you find that your actions have activated a self-destruct sequence. You make your way to the parking lot for your final escape, where you are confronted with the witches once more, who tell you that in 5 minutes, Gels will be resurrected if you fail to defeat them. This is a pretty good fight, and kind of a neat function. If you succeed in beating them within 5 minutes, you're done. But if 5 minutes passes, and the witches are still alive, they disappear, and Gels emerges, providing a unique and intense boss fight. After either fight, you are treated with this ending. This is absolute garbage. This kind of brings me to the biggest offense the game makes. It doesn't value the player's time, because once you beat the story, you unlock a special story, which more or less has the same levels and layout, but has more cutscenes, a way better story, and a way more satisfying ending, making the time you've already spent with the game feel stolen. Provide us with a satisfying story from the beginning. Give us extra game modes like a boss rush or a randomized mode. Add special and unique weapons for subsequent playthroughs. These are ways to make your game a treat to return to, even with shortcomings. These are ways to keep the player coming back to your game. On one hand, you got some pretty decent controls and some neat ideas. On the other hand, you've got a god-awful story and some frustrating enemies and puzzles. I'm gonna have to suggest you try it. There's definitely some fun to be had, and I may even come back to it. But is it really worth going through a crummy story mode to unlock a pretty decent one? Well, that's your call. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment down below. And why not check out this other video I made? You just might like it too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of our latest videos.